Welcome back! Here I am at jseditor.com. This is the online code editor where we're going to write our code for our website, and we can automatically see a preview of our website. You can also use any code editor like Visual Studio Code, but we're going to be using this online code editor for our course. So let's get started. Join me at this website, jseditor.com. Here you can write JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, the three fundamental languages of every website. We're going to start with HTML. HTML allows us to write out what elements do we want on the web page. HTML and CSS are not programming languages. HTML is a markup language and CSS is a styling language. JavaScript is the programming language. We will focus on JavaScript in the course, but we have to start with HTML because we have to start with a website and then we can add functionality to the website with JavaScript. So let's build out a simple website. If you're following along on JEditor, you can automatically write your HTML here inside of this code editor. For example, I could create a paragraph using the HTML p tag and say hello. Then I can close the paragraph. If you're using a different code editor, note that you may be required to set up the HTML. Let me demonstrate what I mean. Here, let's download the website that we just created. This website just says hello. We can download the website by clicking on this file icon and selecting download. That will download the HTML file which stores the website. The CSS and the JavaScript are put into the HTML file. Every HTML page is a website that you can open with your browser. This is what our web page looks like currently if we double click on it. If we double click on the HTML file to open it, it will open in a browser like Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera, Edge, and we'll see hello on it. On any website, you can actually take a look at the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that created the website. To see that, right-click on the page and then select the option View Page Source. This is going to allow you to see the HTML behind the web page. You can see that every web page starts by saying the document type, then with an HTML tag to state that we are creating HTML, then a head tag where you can place metadata, and then a body tag where you actually place all your content. In our case, our content was a paragraph tag. On JEditor, we could just immediately make a paragraph, but if you are using a different code editor, make sure that you have the actual structure set up where you have the document type, then the HTML tag. We use indentation to show that something is inside of a group, such as these tags are inside of the HTML opening and closing tags. Here on JEditor, we can just do a paragraph immediately because JEditor is creating the setup for us on its own. So we so far have a paragraph that says hello, but let's change this up. Let's create a heading 1 using the h1 tag. This is going to create a heading or a large piece of text. We'll call this welcome to chat, and then let's close the heading 1. You'll notice that we get a preview of our website in the browser here at JEditor. So this website, we're going to create a question answer game. So we can rename the project question and answer website, then hit done. So far we have a heading 1, a large heading. Next, let's add in a div which will have an ID. We can put in any ID here if we'd like to identify this element. Then we can put in some text here such as what is your name? This will be our first question for the question and answer game. The div tag is like a container, so it allows you to put in text or groups or several elements. In our case, we're just putting here a piece of text. We can have any ID here that we want, such as our text. And here, we'll just keep this simple for now, and we can change this ID later if we'd like, because it should be a unique identifier for this div, but so far we haven't built much of the functionality yet. So we have a div with a unique identifier of text. Be careful about the casing that you use because JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, they are case sensitive. So be careful about how you write out your HTML markup. It should look similar to what we have here currently. All right, so we have a div that says, what is your name? This will be our first question for the question and answer game. Next up, we need to build out a form. So that way the user can actually give us an answer. They can tell us what is their name. For that, I'm going to create a new element called a form in HTML. This requires an opening and a closing tag. Inside of the form opening tag, I'm going to give it an ID of answer form. So again, a unique identifier for this form. Inside of this form, we can place an input tag. This actually doesn't have a closing tag. You'll notice immediately you'll see an input field appear. This is where a user can put in some name, such as Mammoth, and they can hit enter to submit the form. By default, if you submit a form, the page refreshes. That's why we see JEditor has been refreshed. You can rerun by pressing the run button at any time. This input field is going to expect that the user will enter their name. So we can put a placeholder that says enter answer here. That way the user will see enter answer here. We should also give this input several more properties like the type. We expect that the type should be text for this input field because your name is usually not 10. Your name is usually going to be a piece of text, so it should be treated as a piece of text. We can also give this input an identifier. We're going to give it the answer ID, and its value initially can be empty. You can give it a value if you'd like, such as Mammoth. Then you'll see we'll have a default value of Mammoth if you want to change that, or you can leave it empty by default. That means the user will have to put in their name. So we have what is your name, then we have a form with an input field. So we can see our two elements are working, they're appearing on our website. Great, so this verifies that we're able to display the div and the form in the page. You can also change your layout at any time if you prefer to have the website below your actual HTML. It's up to you what layout format you'd like. There are many different options here at JEditor. You can just click through them until you have the option that you'd like best. All right, so here we have an input field. Commonly with an input field, you will also have a label to describe what the input field is doing. This is best practice. So I'm going to add a label tag, which does require a closing label tag. Inside of this label tag, I'm going to place some text that says answer. This will prompt the user to give me an answer. And on this label opening tag, I'm going to just click right next to it, not on it, because that will take you to more information about it. I'm going to instead use the for property, which tells me for what element is this label. This label is for the element with the ID answer. That's why we put label for answer to specify that this label is for this input. Awesome, so we have a label and we have an input. You'll notice that the label and input, they're quite close to our div. So we can experiment by changing the div to a paragraph. You'll notice this will give it some automatic line spacing around the paragraph and any other elements. So we can transform that div into a paragraph. As well, with a form, we commonly have a button which allows us to submit the form. Because currently, we can submit the form, such as our name, by hitting enter on the keyboard. But more commonly, you'll also have a submit button. So let's create a button. Make sure you're inside of the form because we're still building out all of the content for our answer form. This button requires an opening and a closing tag. You can hit tab to autocomplete that tag. And commonly the text for the button is submit. Note that the text for the button and for the label, they always go between the opening and the closing tags. So here we now have a button that says submit. We can test out our website on different screen sizes as well. And commonly for a button tag will also have a type. Make sure this is the opening button tag, and I'm going to give this button the type of submit. It's best practice to give your HTML tags these properties to specify what they're exactly for. So now if I type in a name like Mammoth, I can hit the button Submit, and that will also submit the form, which by default refreshes the page. If you want to do something else, you can write your own functionality, which we will do later, for what we want to do when we submit the form, such as take us to the next question. Great, so this will be our setup for the question and answer website. Make sure to download your file so that way you have it saved. I will also include the source files for every single lecture in this course. You can find the source files at the end of every single section. So now that we have built out our HTML, we have a website, which means we can actually give the website functionality with JavaScript. So coming up next, now that we have set up our basic HTML website, we are going to set up our first JavaScript. So join me in the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to set up a web page. In this lecture, we're going to write our first JavaScript. We're going to listen for when the answer form is submitted. Currently, if I press submit and I have an answer, or even if I don't, the page will refresh. That is the default behavior for when a form is submitted on a website. If you want to put your own custom functionality, then you can use JavaScript to do that. So let's write some JavaScript in this section. The first thing we have to do is we have to get a reference to our answer form. We have to find it on the web page with JavaScript. To find the web page element, we can use the document object, which comes from JavaScript itself. So you can use the document object in order to reference your whole web page. This is an object that you can use that has different functions, such as get element by ID, get elements by class name, get elements by name, get elements by tag name. We're going to use get element by ID. You can hit enter to select that option. This is a function that's designed to do a specific task, and it was created by JavaScript, and it can only be used if you access it via the document object. This allows you to find an HTML element by its ID. We put parentheses after the function name in order to pass in required arguments or extra data that the function needs. The extra data that this function needs is the ID, which you put into quotation marks, either single or double. And the ID of our answer form we can find by going to our HTML, and we can see that the form has the ID of answer form. We need to copy that and be careful about the casing because it is case sensitive, and we paste it into document.getElementById as the argument. It has to be in quotation marks because it is of the string data type, which means a piece of text. So we cannot just put getElementById and pass in the answer form. We have to pass in the answer form ID in quotation marks. Then we will add a semicolon because each line in JavaScript should end in a semicolon. It's not required, but it is best practice. We're going to then save the result because this function is going to return or store the object or element from the web page that has the ID answer form. We can store that element in a constant that we will call answer form. So here we're creating a constant by using the keyword const. This is a keyword that is built into the JavaScript language. This allows you to create a box, a metaphorical box, and you place a value into that box, and then you can no longer change the value in that box because it is a constant value. We gave our constant the name answer form, but we could call this anything we want. We could call it answer underscore form or just answer, whatever we'd like, because we just created a new constant. Then we can inspect what is actually inside of that box. To check the value of a constant, we can use the console object and use its log function. Console.log allows you to log or print a message to the console. The console on JSeditor is in the bottom right-hand tab, this console window. The console on a website you can access on any website in your browser by going to More Tools and then selecting the More Tools option on your browser and then selecting the browser console. This will open up the browser console, which tells you what's happening behind the scenes in the browser. Typically, if there's an error message that's running because there's a problem on the website, or if there's a message that you wanted to print to yourself, like if you want to use console.log to print a message. We can print any message such as hi with console.log. You'll notice hi will appear in the console window of JEditor. Or we can print out the value of a constant such as answer form. Here we're using the answer form constant and we're going to print its value. The result we see is an HTML form element, which we can click on to see all the properties of that HTML form element, like the index 1 element, which is an input. Index 2 element is a button. So inside of this HTML, it was able to show us the input and the button. And we can see different properties such as the child element count, which is 3 because we also have that label. A child element means an element inside of the current element. And we have a bunch of functions and properties that we can access on this HTML form element. This tells me we are able to successfully grab that answer form. Now, what should we do on that answer form? Well, we can now reference that constant, and we know that we're referencing our HTML form. A form and many elements in HTML, they have the ability to use different functions, such as add event listener. Add event listener, this is a function that was created by JavaScript, again, specifically for an HTML element type. This means we can listen for when there is an event that occurs on this element. We're going to listen for the event of submit. So we pass in the name of the event into quotation marks. Then I'm going to add a comma and add another argument, a function that takes in an event argument. And we can use curly brackets to open up the function body. This means that when we get a submit event, when the form is submitted, we're going to run this function, which is known as a callback function. We can put in whatever custom functionality we want when the answer form is submitted using this exact format. I'm going to take the event and I'm going to prevent its default functionality. So I'm grabbing this event argument and then I'm using its built-in function prevent default. To call a function, you access the object that's available if you're grabbing the function from an object. And then you use parentheses to pass in any required arguments. In this case, you don't have any required arguments, so we just leave these parentheses empty. Event.prevent default means that we're going to prevent the default functionality that would run when this event occurred, the event being submit. So now you'll notice if you try to submit your name, you won't be able to submit any name. I'm clicking submit and I actually am still submitting, but the default functionality is not working, which is why my page is no longer refreshing. If we remove this line of event.prevent default and we hit run again, then we can now submit and we will reload the page. So now we can actually enter a name, and when we submit, the default functionality is done. But we don't want that default functionality. We want our own functionality, which is why we use event.prevent default. Next up, we're going to write what do we want to happen instead of refreshing the page. Instead of refreshing the page upon hitting submit, I want to take the name that was input, whatever name it was, and I want to display it on the web page, and then I want to show the next question. So someone will say, what is your name? Or the website will say, what is your name? The user will give an answer. The website will then change to show hi followed by the name. And then the website will also show a new element. So that is what we will work on coming up next, is being able to handle that first response, the first answer that the user, whoever visits the website, gives. Join me in the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to listen for when an answer form is submitted. In this lecture, we are going to continue our project and learn how we can handle the answer. What should we actually do when this name is submitted. We're going to, in this case, run our chatbot. So I'm going to create a new function for the chatbot. For that, I'm going to create the function before it's called, so that way it's ready to be used. We can use the keyword function to create a new function, and we will call the function run chatbot. This is the function definition. We're going to call this function when the answer form is submitted. We will call run chatbot to do its job. What will be the job of the chatbot? Well, we are going to display the answer that was submitted by our user. So let's display what they actually put. For that, we'll have to create another paragraph that shows the user's response. So in my HTML, we can see we have one paragraph text. We're going to add another paragraph beneath that with the ID of response, and we're going to leave it empty for now, which means it does not contain any value. But if someone puts in the age, we can show their age here, such as 40. Right, so we'll show that age in that paragraph. In the JavaScript, how do we show the age in that paragraph? Well, first we have to actually reference the paragraph. So I'm going to create a constant called response and use document.getElementById of response, so I can get that paragraph. Then if we want to change what's inside of that paragraph, we can take response and we can set its property inner text. And we can say something such as my age. That means when this function is called, we're going to grab the response element. Just make sure you spell response correctly. And then we're going to set its text to say my age. So you'll see if you press submit, you'll be able to see my age will appear. By default, my age does not appear, but once we submit the form, we can see my age. But what if we want to see the age that was input by the user? If we want to see the age that was input by the user, or their name, in this case we're going to do name first because we're asking what is your name. So it will actually be name, not age. Let's say the user enters in a name, and then we want to show that name in the response. If we want to grab the value that the user put in, we can reference the input element. So I'm going to go into run chatbot, and I'm going to get the value of my answer. So first I'm going to get the answer input field. So I'm going to create a constant called answer, and I'm going to use document.getElementById. I'm going to go to my HTML and use here this input field, which has the ID of answer. That's what we want to use as the element, and then we can get its value property. This will show us what is inside of the input field. By default it is empty, but if we put a value into the input field, the value property will change. Then we can take response.innerText and show the value of the answer constant. So now if I place in a name here and hit submit, I will see the name appear under what is your name. So that is how we can take the user's input and display it in the website. Next up, we want to show the next question. So we have to change what is your name to instead be a different question. For that, we'll have to replace what is currently inside of our question. So we can go into our HTML and we can see our question is this paragraph with the ID text. I'm just going to change it instead to be the ID question. Let's take this paragraph and let's replace the text inside. For that, I'm going to go back to my JavaScript and I'm going to create a constant called question. I will use document.getElementById, and I'm going to look for the HTML element with the ID question. Then I'm going to take the question.inner text and replace it to say something else, such as when is your birthday? So we'll move on to the next question. Now you'll notice we start off with what is your name? I can put in a name here, such as Mammoth, and hit submit. Then my question is going to change to when is your birthday? All right, so here we will now have when is your birthday being shown, but we still have Mammoth being shown. So instead of changing my question here, I'm going to display above the question the previous answer. So in my HTML, I have to actually flip. My response should be up top, and then my question should be next. So now I start off with what is your name, then I can put in a name and hit submit, then I see Mammoth, and then I see when is your birthday, and then we'll have another answer. All right, so here we can put in now our next answer to when is our birthday, which we'll work on next. But first, let's inspect this Mammoth. Instead of just showing the name, let's show something a bit more understandable to the user. Let's say your name is. So instead of just showing the answer, I'm going to actually add a string, your name is, and then show the answer. This is called string concatenation. You can take one string or piece of text and add another. So now if you rerun, you can enter in a name, and then you'll see your name is Mammoth. You can even add a period at the end of the sentence if you want, with plus and then adding another string. So now we can enter our name again and we can hit submit. We see your name is Mammoth, and then the question changes to when is your birthday. So in that way, we have been able to handle our first question. So we have been able to take that first question's answer and then grab the value that the user actually gave. Coming up next, we're going to learn how we can handle the second question, when is your birthday? We'll have to build a separate form so the user can enter their birthday, and then we can listen for when that form is submitted. So join me in the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to build out a site and how to handle the answer to our first question. We were able to take the value that the user input and then show the next question. In this lecture, we're going to get started building a birthday form that will allow the user to put in their birthday. Because we could, yes, accept the birthday as just a piece of text, such as January 1st, but instead we want to make the birthday collection more universal. Because what if someone enters 0101, but someone else enters Jan 1, someone else puts in a year? We want to instead use selection options so that the user can select a month and then they can select a day. Join me back in your HTML where we're going to build out a second form. We currently have one form for our first answer, which was, what is your name? We're going to build out a second form for our collection of the birthday from the user. When is your birthday? So I'm going to create a second form. Make sure you're outside of the current form. We're going to create another form tag, opening and closing. Let's give this form an ID of birthday form, so we have a unique identifier for this form. Then inside of the form, we can put the form elements. For example, I can start with an input field. So let's take in an input. This doesn't require a closing tag because it's the input tag type. You'll notice an input field will automatically appear. The previous input had a placeholder, so let's follow the same format. Let's have a placeholder. In here, the placeholder will be enter day. This input field will be for the day of the birthday. So you can say enter day of birthday, or just enter day. Next up, our previous input element also had a type. So let's define the type for this input element. For this one, we want to expect a number because the day of your birthday, it should be a number. You'll notice in the preview for your website, you'll have these two arrow symbols on the right-hand side of your input field because now you can actually only enter numbers. If you try to enter text and then try to hit the arrows, you'll get invalid. So now we have numbers to prompt us to select here a number for our day of birthday. Next up, we also had a value for our previous input, so we can try the same thing with our current input, such as setting the value to be 1. You can use this value property if you want to have a default value for your enter day of birthday. You can leave it empty if you don't want to have a default value. You can also force a minimum and a maximum. For a birthday, there is a maximum of 31 days in a month, or 30 or 28 or 29, but the maximum overall is 31. And there is a minimum of 1. So our minimum entry should be 1, and our maximum entry should be 31. We should not allow anything outside of that range. So if I try to go lower than 1 with the arrow keys, I cannot. And if I try to go higher than 31 with the arrow keys, I cannot either. Right, so this is best practice for how you should build out an input field for a number entry. Our previous input had a button, so let's add in a button for our second form as well. A button will require a closing and an opening tag. Then we can enter the text of the button. Let's just rearrange some of this HTML to put it onto one line. That way we have more space overall in the screen if we have some of our elements on the same line. Okay, so our next button, I'm going to say submit, just like we had last time. This means that the type should also be submit because we are using the button to submit a form. You'll notice if you press that submit button, the page will refresh just like we had previously with our original button before we handled the functionality. Our previous input also had a label, so let's add in a label for our new form, and specifically for the first input element in the form. We're going to have an opening and a closing label tag, and the text of the label will say day. This will be the prompt for the user to enter their day of birthday. Our previous label had a for property, which we're going to set again for our second label, and we're going to use the ID of our input. So our input needs an ID. We didn't put that in yet. So let's give our input the identifier, a unique identifier of birthday day answer. I'm going to zoom out a bit. You can also hit enter if you want to move your HTML on a second line. So the label is going to be for the input field with the ID birthday day answer. Great, so now we have two forms. One to enter just the previous answer, the name, and then a second one for your day of birthday. But what about the month of birthday? We want to get the day and the month. That way we can show how far away, how many days away is your birthday. So for this we'll have to build out a second input field. This one is actually going to be a different type. It's going to be a select tag, which means instead of entering the month manually like January or 1, I'm going to allow my user to select a month from a drop-down menu. This will make it easy for them to enter the month in the correct format. So before the day, typically we will put in the month. So I'm just going to rearrange some of my HTML to put it closer onto the same line. There we go. Or without any line breaks. And then in my form, I'm going to build out a select tag, which will require an opening and a closing tag. You'll notice in your preview, you'll have this select button that will now appear. A select tag allows you to enter in different options for selection. For example, we can have one option tag, which also requires a closing tag, and we can put in an option of January. You'll notice January will appear in that selection box. So your website now has the name entry and then January and then the day option. If you want to separate your elements into different lines, then you can add a space between elements with a break tag. It's better to do it typically with CSS, but for quick prototyping, you can use a break tag. This will put a paragraph break between elements, such as between the two forms, and then between the two inputs in the second form. Right, so now we have here January, and then if you want, you can even have multiple breaks, so that we have there January, and then we have the second group. You can also group elements by putting them into divs as another option. For example, I can create a div with the ID of the birthday day, and then I can close that div and have all my elements for the birthday day inside of that div to act as a group, but then you still want the breaks regardless. Right, so that div is optional, but it is good for grouping. All right, so we have one option for January, and we have one select tag. Before we continue, I want to note some important steps to the select tag. A select tag needs to have a name, so that way you can reference it. We're going to give the name of months and the ID of months. So it has a name and an ID. Each option should have a value. So I'm going to give my first option the value of January. So that is considered the value behind just this text. This text could be anything like 1, but then the value behind it is what is used in JavaScript. Let's create an option tag for each month. So I'm going to have one with the value of February, and I'm going to type here February and close the option tag. You'll notice now you have the option to select January or February. I'm going to create another option with the value this time equal to March, and the text will say March, and we'll close that option tag. In your preview, you'll see March will be available. You can continue with April and type in the text April and close that option tag. Then we have April, May, which we can put in next and close the option tag. We'll create another option tag for June. So just going through the year, we'll create another option tag with the value of July, and the text will be July, and we'll close the option tag. We'll have another option tag with the value of August. The text will be August, and another option tag with the value of September. The text will be September, and we'll close the option tag. We'll have another option value for October, and the text will say October, and then we can close that option tag. So we should have 12 months total, so we'll have another option tag for November, and the text will be November, and we'll close. And finally, one more, we'll have the value of December, the text the same, and we close the option tag. So now we have 12 different options, so our user can select here all of these options for their actual month. If you have one extra, it's because you didn't close one of the option tags. So just try again, and you'll be able to see here January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Great, those are all of the months. So that will allow the user to select the month for their birthday as well as the day, of course, we already have. Because this is a form of input, we need a label for it as per best practice. So above the select option here, the select tag, I'm going to create a label which requires an opening and a closing tag. So let's create that opening and then that closing tag, and the label is going to state month. And we can add a colon after each of our labels that we have here, the month as well as the day. And then we also need to add in the opening tag, for what element is this label? Well, it's for the element with the ID months. So that's why we pass in for months. So now we can enter in what is our name, and then when we're done with that, we will enter what is our birthday, and we'll actually hide this first form later with JavaScript. We don't need these breaks necessarily. We can keep the month and the day closer. Right, so let's say we removed the div, then that would actually put them all in the same line, which can actually look decent for here, having that one entry. So it's up to you how you want this design to go. Do you want to have your day and your month on the same line or on separate lines? So here, we don't need the year from the user. We just need the month and the day, and then we are going to use JavaScript to tell them how many days away is their birthday. So join me coming up in the next lecture. We're going to listen for when the birthday form is submitted. And then after that, we can calculate how many days away is their birthday. I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to build out a new form to select a month as well as a day of birth. And you can see if we currently submit it, then the page refreshes. The form does its default behavior. We want to change that so that instead we can do custom behavior just like we did with the first form. So in this lecture, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to listen for when the birthday form is submitted. In your JavaScript, you can actually see that we have something exactly like that already for the answer form. And we want to do the same exact thing for our birthday form, our form with the ID of birthday form. So we can actually copy and paste this exact code and use it for our birthday form, but we just have to change answer form to birthday form. To recap, I'm going to type it all out so that way it's more clear about how it works. So let me move some of these lines a bit closer together so you can see all of our code. And here, first I'm going to get a reference to my birthday form. I'm going to create a constant called birthday form and use the document object, and I'm going to use its function getElementById. The ID is birthday form. Then I'm going to take that constant, which now references an HTML form element, and use that type's function addEventListener. The event listener that I'm going to add is submit because I'm listening for when that form is submitted. And if that form is submitted, I'm going to open a callback function to do some task with that event. I'm going to take the event and prevent its default behavior, and then I'm going to run the chatbot. So we can see here that we're doing the exact same thing that we did for our answer form, but we're doing it for the birthday form instead, because now we have a second form that we need to handle. So if we test this out, we can enter M for the first form, and then if we enter in a value for the second form, the month and the day, we can hit submit, and you'll notice our page no longer refreshes. So we can play that again. If I enter a day for my birth and hit submit, I'm going to see your name is blank, when is your birthday? Because we actually ran the chatbot just like we did for our answer form. Now we can actually next build our own custom functionality. We don't have to do the exact same thing we did for the answer form. In fact, we must change this. We must change that now we have a new question. We don't have the same question as before. So we'll have to separate these two forms and show them one by one. First, we'll show the name, and then we'll show the birthday, because currently we're just showing everything at once. Before we go on, I noticed that we have some duplicate lines of code. If you ever have a duplicate line of code, it's best to use it only one time and put it in the proper place. The code that we are writing multiple times is event.preventDefault and then run chatbot. Run chatbot, that is a function that we created, so we have to put this into both places, but event.preventDefault, we can actually cut this out and put it at the top of run chatbot, and then we can test this out. So I'm going to run my page and then enter in a value and hit submit, and we can see that everything is working as before. All right, so what we did here is we just took a line and we moved its location. Instead of typing event.preventDefault twice, we just put it once in our run chatbot function. That's going to make our code a little bit cleaner and shorter. So that is how we can listen for when the birthday form is submitted. Next step, we're going to learn in the next section how to handle the birthday questions answer. Because currently, if I put in a month and a day, I don't actually ever use that value because my running chatbot is only handling my first question. So coming up next, we're going to learn how we can handle our next question. Join me in the next section. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to build a birthday form and how to listen for when the form is submitted. In this lecture, we're beginning our section on calculating the days until the next birthday. So first, we have to handle the answer to the birthday question because currently we're just handling the first question. So we're going to actually keep track of the question number. For that, at the top of my file, I'm going to create a variable which is like a constant except that its value can change over time. And I'm going to create a variable called question number and start at 0, which represents the first number. That's right, in JavaScript, counting begins at 0. Then I'm going to do my previously written lines here where I set out my response and then I set my inner text of my response and my question. I'm going to only do that if my question number is equal to 0. So here I'm using an example of a conditional or an if statement. This uses the keyword if, and it may look similar to a function, but it's actually known as a conditional statement instead. In the parentheses, instead of arguments, you put in your condition. In this case, the condition is that question number must equal 0. It's best practice to use 3 equal signs in JavaScript to check for equality. We're checking if the question number is 0. If this condition gets evaluated to true, then we will enter the body of the if statement, which is inside of the curly brackets. If the condition evaluates to false, we will skip over the entire body of the if statement. So now if you press run on your website, you can test this out where if you enter a name, your logic will still work. If you enter a date as well for your month, your logic will be the same. It's the same because we never actually changed the question number. So when I get my question number to be the next question, I want to then update. Question number should increase by 1. Here I'm using a mathematical operator to increase the value of question number by 1. We use plus plus, which is a shorthand. It's the same thing as doing question number equals question number plus 1. We're taking the previous value of question number and we're adding 1. You can also do a shorthand of question number plus equals 1, or the smallest shorthand is just plus plus. So this means that if the question number is 0, we're going to, yes, display your name, when is your birthday, and then we're going to increase the question number. So the next time we run our function, we actually will no longer see this your name is, when is your birthday code being entered. So if you start with what is your name and you put Mammoth, you can hit submit. Then if you put in a date of birth, hit submit. Nothing appears to change right now, but in your console you can actually check if this if statement is being entered or not. And you can use an else statement, which is going to run code if the if statement's condition evaluates to false. If you chain the else statement to the end of the if statement, we can call console.log, and then we can log out the value of question number. So now we can enter a name, Mammoth, and then we can enter in a date of birth, and look at that, we get 1 logged in the console. This tells me we are indeed able to check the question number. So if the question number is not 0, maybe it has increased to 1. So in that case, we can do different functionality. We can, instead of here just showing your name is Mammoth, we can handle the birthday question's answer. So what should we do in that case? Well, we should say that we got your birthday, and we'll actually show later how many days away is your next birthday. But for now, let's just keep it simple. Let's do the same exact thing that we did for question number 0, but change the text. So response.inner text, that is going to show you entered a birthday. And then I'm going to end the line. And then I'm going to take question.innerText and change it to next question. The next question will be, what is your favorite holiday? So we can actually change that to, what is your favorite holiday? So now if you press play on the game or the website, you can run the website by pressing Run Snippet, enter a name first, and then you can enter a birthday, and if you hit Submit, you'll see you entered a birthday. What is your favorite holiday? Alright, so we've been able to show you entered a birthday instead of the previous text that we had. I also want to set the visibility on my forms. Initially, only the first form should be visible. So I can actually do that in my HTML. I can initially set my birthday form to be hidden. For that, I'm going to scroll to the form with the ID birthday form, and I'm going to add a new property to it known as style. This is actually CSS styling that we can put directly into HTML. We're going to set the visibility property of the style to be hidden, and we have to add a semicolon at the end. You'll notice in your website you'll already have a change where you will no longer see that second form. In JavaScript, we want to bring the form back when it is the appropriate time, and that is after the first question has been answered. So I'm going to use document.getElementById, and I'm going to search for the form, which was the birthday form. So just make sure it is that correct name of the birthday form, and we're going to set its style.visibility. So we're accessing the style property and then accessing the visibility property, and we're going to set it to visible. It can be either visible or true. Just be careful with how you spell visible. Make sure you spell it correctly. It's easy to misspell that word visible. So now you'll notice that if you run the website, initially the birthday form will have a visibility of hidden. But if you enter in a name and you hit Submit, then you'll actually be able to see that form will appear. When this form appears, we also want to hide the original form. The original form was the form at the top, the form with the ID answer form. I want to hide that when we have already completed that first question. So I'm going to follow the exact same process of document.getElementById. This time the form is the generic answer form. We're going to set its style.visibility to equal hidden. So the visibility can either be visible or hidden. Initially, the visibility of that form is visible so that I can answer my first question. Then you'll notice the form will actually disappear and we'll only have the second form. In our HTML, we can remove this break statement now and see how we have the change appear. So now we have less of a break. We don't even need that break statement because we are hiding the first form and then showing the second form. Then we can enter the data for the second form and hit Submit, and we see you entered a birthday. What is your favorite holiday? And we'll build out another form for entering the user's favorite holiday. So this is how we can handle the answer to the birthday question. Coming up next, we're going to calculate when is the user's next birthday, and we are going to also show how many days away is the user's birthday, the next birthday, because currently we just show you entered a birthday, but that's a bit boring. Let's use some JavaScript to learn how can we calculate when is the next birthday and how many days away is the next birthday. Join me in the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to handle a birthday questions answer. In this lecture, we're going to continue learning JavaScript to learn how we can calculate the next birthday. We'll be able to show when is the user's next birthday and then how many days away is their next birthday. For that, let's jump back into our project, and we're going to have to add more code into this else statement that we currently have. Let's build out a separate function to calculate our next birthday. So I'm going to here create a new function. Well, first I'm going to call it calculate next birthday, and then we have to define it above. We're going to create a function called calculate next birthday because it's best to separate your code into manageable blocks instead of just throwing it all into one function. So we need to calculate our player's next birthday or our website user's next birthday. They will give us a month and they will give us a day. Now, their birthday could either be in the same year or it could be in the next year. Let's just start simple with considering or stating and assuming that their birthday is going to happen in the same year. So even if it already happened, we can just calculate the days from then. And then later, we'll add how to check if their next birthday is actually in the next year. But let's start off with the same year. So if they put in month January, day 1, that means their birthday is on January 1st. Now, first let's get the year. So I'm going to create a constant for the birthday year. Their birthday year is going to be the current year. With JavaScript, we can actually get the current year by creating a new date object. The new keyword means that we're creating a new object from a class. The class that we are using is the date class created by JavaScript to represent a date in history along with a time. And we use parentheses to instantiate the object after the class name. A class is used to represent an entity like a blueprint, and then you can create multiple objects from the blueprint class. We can test out the birthday year. So what happens if we create that constant? Let's look in our console. Now for this to appear, we have to make sure that we go through the form so we can actually call that function. And we can see here in the console we have a new date object, which is actually going to be empty originally, but it actually does have the new date. And we can get from this date different properties such as the year. So we can get full year from that date. So now I'm just going to go through this again and get my day, and look at this. We get the year 2022. You'll get whatever year it is that you are calling this function get full year. So this verifies that we're able to get the birthday year. But next up, how do we get the birthday month? Well, the birthday month, my client, my user, is going to enter for me. They're going to select a month from this drop-down list, which means that we have to get the value that was selected. Here, what object, what option did the user select from this menu? That's what we have to get. So let's create a const for the birthday month, and I'm going to have to reference my selected birthday month object or element, which is an HTML element. So to grab that, I have to create another constant called selected birthday month element. I'm going to use document.getElement by ID. And then in my HTML, we need this object, this select object, which has the ID months. So the ID is going to be months. All right, so there we go. That will allow us to get the selected birthday month element. To get the actual month from that HTML element, we have to access selected birthday month element. And then I'm going to get the selected index. So I'm going to then call console.log and show you the birthday month that we have as a result. And to do that, we have to go through the form and submit and enter in a date for the birthday. You'll notice we get 0. That's because we selected January. So I'm actually going to add 1 so that our first month has the value of 1, because that is how we represent dates, is by their number, and same thing with months, by their number. January is 1, February is 2, and so on. So now we can test this out again. If I enter a birthday, I can see 1 is the value for January. If you change this to June, you'll get 6 as the value for the month. If you change it to December, then you will get 12 as the value for the month. Right, so that is how we can display the birthday month. So we have the year and we have the month. Next up, we need to get the day. So how do we get the day? Well, the day is just going to be whatever my user input here into the day of their birthday. We just have to get the value of this input field. So I am going to create a const called the birthday day, and I'm going to use document.getElement by ID. Then I have to go to my HTML and I have to find that input field, which has the ID birthday day answer. That's the ID that I'm going to use. That just returns for me the element, and then I have to get the value of that element. The value will actually tell me what the user put into the input field. Then I can call console.log and I can log out the birthday day. Make sure it's not inside of double quotes so that you're actually getting the constant, not just a piece of text. So now you can choose a month, you can choose a day, and you'll be able to see here you entered a birthday, what is your favorite holiday, and then we can see in the console we have 4 for the month and 3 for the day. So this tells me we are able to successfully get our birthday year, our birthday month, and our birthday day, at least in the current year, because we're just considering the new date get full year to get the birthday in the current year, and then later on we'll handle if the birthday already happened. So then we can create a new date from the year, the month, and the day. A date is represented as a string where we have the number of the day, the number of the month, and the number of the year separated by hyphens. So if I want to create a new date, I'm going to create a constant called birthday date and instantiate a new date object. And we actually have to go in the format of year, month, and day. So it's not actually day, month, year. You should be careful here. In JavaScript, it's going to be first the birthday year. Then you have to add a hyphen. Then you're going to add the birthday month. And then again, add a hyphen. So be careful here about the formatting. And then you're going to add the birthday day, and don't add a hyphen at the end of that. So that will give you the birthday date. And you can log out the birthday date, that new constant that we just created. So first we enter a name, then we enter a here month and a day, and we submit, and we get the new date logged out. It looks empty here in this JEditor console, but in actuality it has the year, the hyphen, the month, and the hyphen, and the day, and it's all stored in a new date. And here, if you log this in a regular console, you can actually see it. It will be indeed the proper date. It's just here on JEditor, we just see an empty date. All right, so that is how we can get the month, the day, and the year, and we can create a new date. So that will be considered calculating the next birthday. And coming up next, we have to calculate how many days away is that birthday. So join me in the next lecture where we will calculate how many days away is this birthday date compared to today. Welcome back. Previously, we learned how to handle a birthday questions answer, and as well how to calculate how many days there were until the next birthday. And we can see we have you entered a birthday, and then what is your favorite holiday. So what we need to do next is calculate how many days away is that birthday, and that is what we will show inside of our response instead of you entered a birthday. So here we can actually move our response instead into our calculate next birthday function. Of course, then we have to move the location of where we create that response constant, because a constant is only available where you create it. So if you create it inside of a function, it's only available inside of that function. So if you want to use a response or any constant across multiple functions, then you have to create it outside of any single function. All right, so here we have our birthday date, and we can actually show that here as response.innerText. So I'm going to enter in my name and then put in a birthday. And then you'll notice we get the birthday date, which is Friday, December 31st, 2021, 16:00 GMT 0800. So here we get the birthday date that was created. It was created with the birthday year and the birthday month and the birthday day. So if you enter in January 1st, it's going to start actually on December 31st at midnight. And in this case, we are using GMT or Pacific Standard Time, so that is why we see that value. It's actually converted to midnight for the default time. All right, so let's say we put in a different value. So I'm just going to rerun, and I'm going to answer here my name and then submit. And then let's say I put in a different birthday like February 4th. I hit submit and I get February 3rd of the current year, and then again 16 for the hour. Because the hour is being shown in Pacific Standard Time on my computer, you might see a different value for the time if you are in a different time zone. All right, so here we're currently showing the birthday date. And it's always going to be one day previous and then midnight in the default time. So it will convert to your time zone, but it will be in the default time zone midnight. In Pacific Standard Time, however, that is 8 p.m. So that's why I see 8 p.m. 8 p.m. So next, let's calculate how many days away is that birthday, because that is what I am going to show. I'm going to show how many days away is that birthday. So I need to build a second function that will calculate how many days away is this birthday. For that, I will create a new function called calculate how many days away. This function is going to take in a date argument, and it will calculate how many days away is this date. So I'm going to then call my calculate how many days away, and I'm going to pass in the birthday date as my value. Because I call this function inside of calculate next birthday, I'm actually going to create it beforehand. That way it's already created and ready to be used in the function below, because code is compiled, which means it is evaluated from the top down. All right, so what should we do inside of this function? Calculate how many days away. We need to figure out a way to calculate how many days are between two dates, the current date right now and the birthday, which is the date argument. Well, this function, we can return a value of days, or how many days away is the date. So we can return a constant or a variable, which means that the function will store that value. The function will act as a variable, so you can actually store some result at the end of the function. The return statement should be the last line in any function if it will return a value. A function doesn't have to return a value, but it can if you want to store a value at the very end. So we have to create this constant, how many days away is the day. Let's start at 0. All right, just a simple constant set to 0. Then we can set our response.innerText to be equal to the returned value. So I'm going to here set the response.innerText to equal the value that is returned by that function. So I can go through my steps of the chat, submit a birthday, and I get 0 being shown because my response.innerText is showing the returned value of this function call. The returned value will be 0 because I just set this value to 0. If I set this value to 10, then I can go through the steps again, and I'm going to see 10 will be shown on the screen. But what if I want to actually calculate the difference between two dates? Well, we can actually subtract dates. We can take the current date, which we have to get the current date by creating a new date, and we can subtract the date argument that is passed in, which is also a date object. As long as the two values are of the date type, you can actually subtract. Then you can go through these steps and hit submit, and you'll get a value returned or shown on the web page. This value is actually showing you the difference between the two dates. How much time is there between the two dates? But this value is actually shown in milliseconds. So that's why we see such a large value, because this is actually the difference in milliseconds. So I'm going to create another constant called difference in milliseconds, and I'm going to then reference that new date minus date. So currently I am seeing the difference in milliseconds. If I put in a birthday, it will show me the difference between right now and that date in milliseconds. So I need to do a bit of math to convert milliseconds into days to get how many days are there in between the two dates. So how can we convert a millisecond to a day? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's here think about how many milliseconds are in a second. That way we can convert milliseconds to seconds. Then we can convert seconds to minutes. We can convert minutes to hours, and then we can convert hours into days. So I'll create a constant called milliseconds in a second. There are 1,000 milliseconds in a second. So if I want to convert the difference from milliseconds to seconds, then I just have to take the difference in milliseconds and I have to divide it by the number of milliseconds in a second, because that is going to take the milliseconds divided by 1,000, which will give me the number of seconds. And you can test this out by entering in your chatbot a value, but we just have to make sure we actually are showing the difference from milliseconds to seconds. Make sure that is what you are displaying on your web page. Make sure that's what you are returning by the function. So now you'll see the value will be smaller. It will have a decimal number because we've converted these seconds from milliseconds. So we had milliseconds and now we converted them into seconds. So now what we have is the difference in seconds. All right, so that's the value that we just got. But what if we wanted to convert seconds into minutes to see how many minutes are there between the two dates? Well, we can create a constant called the difference in minutes. And what we do is we take the difference in seconds and we divide it by the number of seconds in a minute. And what is the number of seconds in a minute? Well, it is 60. There are 60 seconds in a minute. So if you want to take seconds and convert them into minutes, we have to take the seconds and we have to divide them by 60. And then we can display the difference in minutes. So now if I enter in a name and then I enter in a birthday, I'll see a smaller number again. So we still have a decimal place, but the integer is smaller. And that means that we have got our difference in minutes. What if we want to convert the minutes into days? Well, first we have to convert the minutes into hours. So we have to take this difference in minutes, and now let's see how many hours are there between the two dates. So first we can write down how many minutes are there in an hour. Well, there are 60 minutes in an hour, which means that if we want to calculate the difference in hours, we can take the difference in minutes and we can divide it by the minutes in an hour. For example, if you have 60 minutes and you divide it by 60, then you will get 1 hour because there are 60 minutes in an hour. Then we can display the difference in hours. So here I'm going to enter my name and then enter in a birthday. And look at that, we have an even smaller number because now we have the difference between the two dates in hours. We have one more step. Now we just have to convert hours to days. So let's create a constant called hours in a day. How many hours are there in a day? There are 24 hours in a day. So if I want to calculate the difference in days, I have to take the difference in hours and I have to divide it by the number of hours in a day. For example, if the difference is 24 hours, I divide that by 24 and I get 1 because 24 hours is 1 day. Then I can show the difference in days. So now I can enter in my name and submit. Then I can enter in a day, submit, and look, I get the number of days between the two dates. And we also have a long string or long series of numbers for the decimal places. So we can actually just remove all of these decimal places by using a JavaScript function. So I'm going to wrap this how many days away is the date in the function math.ceil, which is short for ceiling. This returns the smallest integer greater than or equal to its numeric argument. So this means we're going to take this number and convert it to an integer, which means a whole number. This math object is a class, so I'm actually referencing a class, not an object, because I don't have the new keyword. Math is a JavaScript class with tons of helpful mathematical functions, such as seal, short for ceiling. So now if I enter in my name and I enter in a birthday, I can see 164. That shows me the number of days between the current date and the actual upcoming birthday. If I enter a date in the future, I actually get a negative number because we haven't handled future holidays or future birthdays yet. We've only handled past birthdays so far. All right, so that is how we can calculate how many days away is the user's birthday. And we can display that inside of the response.innerText. Currently, we just show the number, but we can add a string that says your birthday is, and then add on here how many days away. And then we can also add days away. Just make sure you have enough spaces. And you can hit enter if you want to put the values onto a new line. So now if we go through and we enter our name and then we enter in a birthday, we can see that we will get your birthday is 45 days away, or however many days, because we take this string, we add the number of days in between, and then we add days away. So we can try again. We can enter a name and then enter in a birthday, hit submit, and we see your birthday is negative 16 days away. So if we have a day in the past, then currently we have a positive number, but if we have a day in the future, we currently have a negative number. So although we are showing the number of days in between these two dates, where we take the current date and then we subtract the birthday date, I'm actually going to reverse this so that I take the date and then I subtract the current date. The reason I want to take the current date and subtract, or take the birthday and then subtract the current date, is so that I get the number of days in between in a positive value if the date is in the future. So I'm going to enter a mammoth, then enter in a date. So this is going to be a date in the future now. Currently the month is June, and if I enter in a month in the future, I'm going to get a positive value. If I enter a month in the past, I'm going to get a negative value. Coming up next, I want to always show a positive value. So currently we have a positive value for if the birthday is in the future, because we have the future date and we subtract the current date. But what about if I had a birthday that already happened this year? What if my birthday was January 1st and it already happened? Currently, I see a negative number. I see that my birthday is negative 164 days away. I want to change this so that instead it tells me when will be my next birthday in the next year. Currently, you'll notice in calculate next birthday, we always set the year to be the current year. But if my birthday already happened, then that means that I'm telling myself how many days away is my previous birthday, which I don't want. So coming up next, we're going to add a check. We're going to check if the birthday already happened, then we're going to change the birthday year actually and put it to be the next year. That way we can handle if the birthday already happened this year, we will no longer show a negative number. We'll actually change the year to be in the future, and then we'll still show a positive number just like we do for birthdays that are currently in the future. So that is what we will work on coming up next. Don't miss the next lecture. Welcome back. Previously we learned how to calculate how many days away is a birthday. But we noticed that if the birthday had already happened, then we got a negative value. That's because we were going into the same year, but a month that already happened. So instead, we're going to check if the birthday already happened. Then we are going to go to the next year for that birthday instead of using the same year. Because currently, if you go into your birthday, you'll notice that we're always using the current year for the year. But I'm going to add a check to see if the year is the current year, which it will be by default, but if the birthday has already happened. So how do I do that check? Well, for that, I'm going to use an if statement and open up a condition that I want to check. Inside of calculate next birthday, I'm going to check if the current date, which is new date, you can use that to get the current date. If that is greater than the birthday date. Right? So if the current date is greater than the birthday date, that means that the birthday already happened, because dates can be represented as integers. And so if the date happened, then that means it was a smaller value. Every date, as we go into the future, the dates increase, and so do their integer representations. So that's why if the current date is greater than the birthday date, it means the birthday date is smaller, so it already happened. So if the birthday did already happen, then I am going to change the year. So instead of using the current birthday year, I am going to use the next year. So here, I'm going to change birthday year to be the current birthday year plus 1. Now, if you want to edit birthday year, it cannot be a constant. It must be a variable, which you can create with the let or var keyword, because you cannot change the value of a constant, but you can change the value of a variable. Then we can move down our birthday date and inspect our results. So here we are still using birthday year, birthday month, birthday day, but if the current date is greater than the birthday, that means we have to go to the next year. So if we test this out at the present stage, we can submit a name, we can then submit a birthday. Let's state a birthday that already happened. You'll notice in your console, however, you'll get a message that says, cannot access lexical declaration birthday date before initialization. All right, so what this is telling me is I'm trying to access birthday date before it's been actually created. So what I have to do is instantiate my birthday date first, and then recreate it if there is a change in the year. Because if we want to access a constant, the code is read from the top down, so the constant has to be created. So birthday date has to be created if I want to use it in a condition that is below. So here I'm checking now the same exact thing. If the current date is greater than the birthday date. If so, I'm increasing the birthday year by 1, and I'm recreating the birthday date by reassigning its value. So the constant was already created. You use the const keyword to create the constant the first time. If you want to change its value, you don't need to use the keyword. However, you cannot change the value of a constant. You must change it to be a variable with the keyword let or var. The first time that you create the variable, you have to use the keyword let or var. And then afterward, if you want to change the value, you don't use that keyword again, because you're not declaring the variable, you're not creating it, you're just changing its value. So now we can test out our question and answer site. We can put in a birthday. Let's put in a birthday that already happened, and look at that. We get your birthday is 203 days away. If we put a birthday in the future, we get your birthday is 111 days away. All right, if we put a birthday slightly in the future, your birthday is 19 days away. Slightly in the past, we get your birthday is 354 days away. So this birthday recently happened, but instead of getting a negative number, we instead go to the next year. So this birthday recently happened, which means the next birthday is really far away because my birthday just happened. All right, so that is how we can handle if a birthday already happened with some JavaScript logic. Coming up next, we're going to handle our next question. What is your favorite holiday? So that will be the next question. We'll need a new form where the user can select their favorite holiday. And then we'll have to handle that favorite holiday and show how many days away is that favorite holiday. Join me in the next section.